afternoon. Goedemiddag. Welcome to this webinar of the CantaRode International Choral Festival. I'm very happy that you are attending this webinar from what I understood, from all over the world. Currently, we are in the beautiful city of Kerkrade. This morning, I traveled all the way from the other part of the country to this beautiful environment in Kerkrade. It's really, really lovely to be here. But most importantly, we have two fantastic guests today. We have today here, it's Imre Ploeg from the Netherlands Chamber Choir. He will be presenting part of his projects and work he does for the Netherlands Chamber Choir. And not here in Kerkrade, but in Baden-Baden, internationally, in Germany, is Tido Visser. He's the, there he is. Welcome, Tido. Glad you can join in this virtual webinar from Baden-Baden. The theme for today's webinar is choral music next generation. And I think with both the story of the NKK, the Netherlands Chamber Choir, and the project from Imre, NKK Next, we have two fantastic examples and projects where we can talk about what choral music could be in the future, or maybe where we should work on today for the future, for the next generation of choral music in our society. What we will do today, Tido will be presenting first his part of his story. After that, Imre will have his presentation. Then we will have a short conversation about both their work and about the theme. There is the opportunity for you, if you want to ask questions to either Imre or Tido, or maybe to the festival, you can put them down in the chat. I was informed that it is possible to chat under your screen, so feel free to ask questions. It would be very good that we can interact with you at the other part of the country and of the world. So feel free to ask your questions or add remarks and say what you think, or share your own ideas on choral music next generation. It is good to say that we are hosted today by the International Choral Festival CantaRode. By the end of this webinar, also Dion Ritter will join us, and he will explain about this festival, what it will be. And you saw the introductory video, and at least it gives me energy to start singing and get together and have a fantastic festival again. I look so much forward to that after missing that for the last 2 years. So it will be an exciting afternoon. I had some preparatory talks with both gentlemen, and I was really excited about the story they have to share. And there are so many important elements that we all should thinking about the future of choral music. So I'm very happy that we can share it with you, and I hope we would get good thoughts and questions also from your side as well. So feel free to put them in the chat, and we will feed them into the conversation after the two presentations. But now I would like to give the floor and introduce Tido. Tido, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, you're here. Welcome, Tido. All the way from Baden-Baden. Glad you can join from I think it is a hotel room, is it?
It is. It's nothing romantic, but just a simple, plain hotel room. Tonight I'm going to see a concert of Theodor Koornetwerk and his Musica Eterna, which is an amazing orchestra and choir, actually. He's Greek. He grew up in Russia, and he's supposedly one of the most important conductors at the moment. And tonight they're performing a piece called Ein Schemen from electronic composer Yannis Kyriakides, which was commissioned by the Netherlands Chamber Choir in 2017 for the choir and for harpist Remy van Kesteren. And it's a sort of an echo on the Brahms Requiem. So tonight we're having a wonderful concert, I hope, and talks about the future with Theodor.
That's fantastic. I completely understand you have to be there. And by the way, if I look that way or that way, that's because we have multiple cameras here, which I'm not used to. So apologize if I do look in the wrong camera, but now I'm there. So this is the right camera now. Tido is currently the director of the Netherlands Chamber Choir, and he did a tremendous job in transforming the choir to what it is right now. And I could tell lots of things about it because I saw part of the exciting journey that he made in the past almost decade, I think, with the choir. But I think the best person to share what he did and why, I think that's both important, what and why. It's best if Tido, you yourself, you can share your story about the Netherlands Chamber Choir and about what your vision on next generation choral music. Please, Tido.
Yes, thank you. Well, in order to reflect on the choir, I mean, we were founded in 1937, and we've had many highlights in those past, what is it now, 84, almost 85 years. But also downfalls. And I would like to take you along in that story because we made mistakes. We did things right, but we also made mistakes, and of mistakes you can learn best. So that's why I would like to zoom out a little bit before we actually start to talk about the Netherlands Chamber Choir. And in order to zoom out, I would like to ask the question, which unfortunately I cannot communicate about with you, all of those people around the world, directly at this moment, but hopefully another opportunity will occur to do so. But what role plays art in your country? And what's the function of it? Because in every country it is perceived and treated in a different way. Artists are perceived and treated in a different way. The function of art in every country is different. But we can agree, I would say, without much doubt, that art is important. Often it's seen as a consuming thing. It's something that makes us happy, makes us enjoy the world. But I would like to say that actually art is like a pillar of society. In order to do that, I would like to connect it to Leonardo da Vinci. When Leonardo da Vinci, of course, we know him from the Mona Lisa, but we also know him from his amazing inventions. And he was called, in the Renaissance, he was called the Homo Universalis. And the Homo Universalis, when I think of Leonardo da Vinci, I always think of him as a man with many talents. That's why he was called the Homo Universalis. But that whenever he would start painting, he would turn off the other buttons. He would turn on the button in his brain of painter. And then the next day, when he would start to invent, he would turn off the button of a painter and would turn on the button of inventor. But of course, it's not that way. Everything is interconnected because it was all happening in his brain. Everything was fluid in his brain. And I think that's also what art is about. Art, it has this amazing quality to go through all pillars of society. So you have science as a pillar, you have healthcare as a pillar, you have technique as a pillar, but you also have agriculture as a pillar, but you also have art as to perceive it as a pillar is important for us to understand that art stands for something, that it really is an unmissable part of our society. But maybe more than all of the other pillars together form society, it has this amazing quality to go through all the other pillars, like water. And I will explain to you how that functions within the projects of the Netherlands Chamber Choir. I'm going to zoom back one step more even. So if you say what role plays art in your country, I would say that what is maybe an even more important question, do we as artists have a responsibility in this world? And responsibility is an interesting word. It's interesting to observe because if you break it down, you could say your ability to be responsive and your ability to be touched or moved by something, be sensitive to something. And it can be related directly to the notes being played, the text being spoken, or big political issues, or anything in between. So my question also to you is, after what role plays art in your country, is what is it you as an artist want to be co-responsible for through your work, and how does that express itself for you on a daily basis? And I think urgency in that for that matter is a very important key word. And I'm going to explain. The Netherlands Chamber Choir, as I said, is an amazing choir, but the darkest times of the choir were a direct consequence of a fundamental lack of urgency. And I would like to put that into a little bit of an historic perspective. So I'm going to focus on the classical music world for a moment. Imagine an incredibly rich musical life all over Europe, vast amounts of amazing contemporary composers in the 1980s finally were making it to the big stage, thanks to the efforts of newly founded groups like, maybe you know them, the Schoenberg Ensemble or Ensemble Moderne or Ensemble Intercontemporain. And those composers we are talking about, they were born just before or around the two world wars. They had seen the devastation of war. They had seen the dark side of mankind. They were all in their own way dealing with immense subjects by writing about freedom of speech or the lack of it. Shostakovich, for example, he wrote his Kammer Symphony opposing against the Soviet regime. Maurizio Kagel, Argentinian German composer, brilliantly used humor to get to the core of people's deepest fears of the Nazi regime. Benjamin Britten opposing against the concept of war with his War Requiem. All of those composers, they have one fundamental thing in common. They wrote about something that mattered to them deeply. They were telling the story that needed to be told, just like the pioneering ensembles performing their work. Symphony orchestras soon were to follow. Opera houses started to dedicate a substantial part of their programming to those composers. And they got governments to support them, especially in the 80s, that started to rise. They started to receive subsidies. And not little amounts, but sometimes huge sums of money. We wish we had them now, actually. But there is a downside. The great danger of government subsidies is that your artistic independence is institutionalized. You're sure to go by the rules of the government in order to get your subsidy. Dutch government told us to focus, for example, on disabled people back in the late 80s. Very important. It then shifted, though, towards a focus on cultural diversity in the 90s. And then all of a sudden that was not important anymore. And we went to entrepreneurship. We had to be cultural entrepreneurs and public outreach. We had to reach as much audience as possible at the start of the millennium. And now we're back, we're more towards a more integral approach, and I'm very glad for that, very thankful for that. But what do you get when you shift that focus on a constant basis? You get an artist who starts telling the story that people want to hear, the story that politicians want to hear, the story that governmental funds want to hear, rather than the story to be told. So everything that is institutionalized eventually loses support. So how did the European Union start, for example? Big minds joining forces in a mutual effort to put an end to endless wars. Of course, they saw big economic advantages as well in creating a union, but the initial goal was bigger. Let's unite, not divide. And the people of Europe shared this sense of urgency and their leaders. But when the European community started to institutionalize, the ideals also started to institutionalize. It drifted away from its initial idea. It started to lack ownership. And hold that thought, please, ownership. Because many of you, I'm sure, have at one point in your life started your own ensemble. I've understood that many of you are choral conductors. Some of you have entered a choir which has been existing for a long time, but I'm sure that all of you at some point have started your own ensemble. And you come together, enthusiasts, you are full of the idea, but after some time, you always see this one person feeling a little bit more responsible for the well-being of the group than the other. So he or she volunteers to try to find concerts, to sell concerts, to make a contract, to do some administrative work. Of course, he or she is making sure there is a spare copy for the one who always forgets his music, and it's almost always a guy, not a girl, forgetting his music. And slowly you start to see a division of those who feel ownership and those who don't. The opportunists, you could say, or in the best case, the participants, the ones that are just a group, and the owners that do all the work. In the best case, they get a compliment every now and then for the efforts they make. In the worst case, the opportunists just criticize the owners because they feel like it's the end of the group. No ownership, no urgency, no group. No ownership, no urgency, no European Union. No ownership, no urgency, no art. So again, the question, what is it you want to be co-responsible for? So I think we can say with some confidence that urgency is about ownership. Urgency implies ownership. Ownership implies urgency. So let me repeat what I said a little earlier. Urgency is useless. The thinking out of the box, you could say, to be innovative, all of those kind of things, they are useless unless there is a sense of urgency. And because we were talking in the 90s and 80s, there was all of a sudden this sense that we had to innovate. I forgot that one. That's why I'm hesitant for a moment. Cultural entrepreneurship, cultural diversity, and innovation. It was very important at a certain point. So being innovative is a hollow phrase unless there is a sense of urgency. So if urgency implies ownership, and vice versa. And innovation is also about ownership, about taking responsibility, about truly and genuinely believing in something. And when you understand this, you will realize that innovation is but a tool, a very useful tool, but nothing more than a tool to tell the story that needs to be told. It's not a starting point, it's not an aim in itself. Cultural entrepreneurship is not an aim itself. Cultural diversity is not an aim in itself. It's only important part of the story that needs to be told. If you don't apply this rule, you create form and you do not create content. You create a theater play after designing the set rather than designing a set based on what you want to tell. And that's a mistake, obviously. So here we are in 2021. It took the art sector across a pandemic to wake up because we had lost that sense of urgency. And it's maybe best when trying to formulate an answer to the question why art is important to go back to my own organization, where you see the mistakes that have been made. We were one of those organizations, as I said before, rising to the nation in the 80s, receiving huge subsidies in the 90s, and not having any clue of our reason of existence in the first decade of the millennium. We had no answer whatsoever to the question what our purpose was on Earth. With the vast history that the Netherlands Chamber Choir has, we have obligations. A vast history creates obligations. If you start to lose touch with the world around you, if you doze away, if you become self-satisfied, history eventually becomes a burden. It becomes the proof that your time has come to finally quit. That's what it is. But then when things go well, history becomes like a flywheel. When you innovate, when you rejuvenate, relate to the world around you, understand your true urgency, people see in your vast history the key to your current success. History either drains you or recharges you, depending on how you relate to the here and now. The same you could apply to the European Union. The Netherlands Chamber Choir obviously has experienced basically everything in its 80 years. From dullness to dynamics, from arrogance and anxiety to brilliance and success. We have celebrated triumphs in the world's biggest concert halls, and we have seen fear taking the better of our singers. We installed wonderful pension schemes for our singers to protect, just like ballet. They have to quit at a young. But a couple of years later, we became acquainted with Ruth's massive redundancy through 75% subsidy. We could no longer exist without relating to the outside world. Just what we were doing, which was singing, but without urgency at that end. So over the past years, we, the Netherlands Chamber Choir, looked in the mirror and have worked very hard to create a urgency, asking ourselves, why are we on Earth? What do we want to be co-responsible for? And especially in the times of Corona, I think this is something that has given us some time to reflect on that question again. And we went back to the core of choral in order to define our own purpose. And I would like to go actually to slide number 2. I mean, first slide is a wonderful logo, but that's not so interesting. But slide number 2 with the circle. Do I see it myself as well, or am I going to keep seeing myself? I don't know. Doesn't matter. I hope you're seeing. There's one slide. And the next, no, one further. Yes, there we are. So in Corona times, we really had to ask ourselves, okay, what is our purpose? What is it? Why are we on this planet? And if you look at the essence of choral music, you could say it is about vulnerability. But vulnerability as a quality. My father was an opera singer, and he would explain it brilliantly. Whenever he would mess up a high, he said, whenever I mess up a high, or whenever a saxophone player messes up a high note, he looks disgusted at his instrument. But what do I look at when I mess up my high note? My own body. There's nothing between the body of the singer and its audience, the ones who listen. So there's that vulnerability, and at the same time there is this amazing quality of creating solidarity, of interconnectedness, of unity through singing. We all have experienced that. of course. There are these investigations like the research from Oxford University 2015 that choral singing accelerates friendship making in an unprecedented way, more than any other form of things that you do together in which you collaborate. Choral singing accelerates friendship in an amazing way. So we decided that we repeated the question, say, what are we on earth for? We believe in a world where vulnerability is a quality and solidarity is essential. Because what we see is that this vulnerability is under attack by the sarcasm of this of so many political leaders at this moment. It's being washed away by um, fake truth and fake news, and at the same time, solidarity is very hard to find in this world. So we can play as a choir an amazing role into that. Well, by formulating that purpose, we got actually to the golden circle of Simon Sinek, and that's what you see in front of you. It's very simple, but it's very effective. In the middle, you see the why, then you have the how, and then you have the what. A lot of companies, but also a lot of arts institutions, they know what they are doing. They are the products that they sell or the services that they bring. Later, a smaller amount of companies and organizations know how they do it. These are the things, it's also written there, you can see, that make them special or set them apart from their competition. But then there are very few who know why they do what they do. And why is not about making money, that's a result. Why is a purpose, cause, or belief. It's the very reason your organization exists. And that's why we came to that phrase. We believe in a world where vulnerability is a quality and solidarity is essential, because we truly believe that it makes a better world. And what do we do in order to make that happen? Is we do that through choral music, through choral singing. I think that we can go to the next slide, because I would like to take you into that story through our project. Well, this is a project which was presented in 2018 at the Holland Festival, a collaboration between one of the most anarchist theater groups in the Netherlands and the angel-like voices of the Netherlands Chamber Choir. And Gesualdo, as you may know, composer in the 16th century, he wrote amazing music, but he had a very tormented and dark life. He killed his wife when he discovered that she was with somebody else, with the Count of Carafa in the neighborhood of Naples. Well, here you see how in this production how urgency can be presented in one form, because this project was actually telling a story about the sublime. The sublime is what is amazingly beautiful and has its very dark side at the same time. So, and what's so nice about this project is that everybody perceived those opposites also in the collaboration between the Netherlands Chamber Choir and the Warmewinkel, those anarchists that would appear naked on stage and do all kinds of controversial things, and this very dressed up Netherlands Chamber Choir with their angel-like voices, and all of a sudden they were collaborating. It was already a clash in the mind of people. What's going to happen there? And eventually it was one of the most controversial performances in the Holland Festival in 2018. But what is so interesting is that you can um, uh, uh, zoom into a theme of this sublime, which is so actual at the moment, because you could say that the sublime is all around at the moment, and at the same time you have that collaboration between two groups, which already connects to the theme itself. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, this is another project which we did in 2017, 2018, and 2020. We started off in the Festival of Early Music in Utrecht, and we did it in Brussels, in New York Lincoln Center, and 2020 in Adelaide Arts Festival, just before the lockdown. 150 Psalms was a huge project. It was 100. It came about thinking about. I was standing in a church at a certain point, and I was listening to the choir rehearsing a psalm, and there was a little exhibition about the psalms and how they came into existence, and how in that church monks used to recite the psalms, all psalms every day. And when that became too much work, how practical, they decided to do 150 psalms in 1 week. But of course, those 150 psalms, they are from the Old Testament. They are from 3,000 years ago. And we wanted to show with this project how recurrent they were, how actual those psalms still were. And we thought, can we perform 150 psalms by 150 different composers, covering 1,000 years of choral music, and at the same time show them as this, present them as this mirror for society. The mirror for society that they were 3,000 years ago, and the mirror for society that they can still be today. And maybe the next slide, please. Yes. So here, for example, we connected very actual pictures with texts of the Psalms underneath them, and you would see how those 3,000-year-old texts started to resonate when putting them under the actual pictures. What makes the Psalms so amazing and so actual? It's the right words I only found when I was at the Adelaide Arts Festival. There, especially in this world where so many minorities are trying to get a voice, where so many people who have been humiliated over the past centuries or millenniums try to get a voice. Equality between men and women, rights for homosexuals, for the LGBTIQ plus community. There are so many differences in this world, horizontally, vertically, diagonally. I mean, if I sit with one person in front of me, we can already define many differences in terms of political preference, or sexual interest, or gender, or religion, whatever. But imagine you have 5 people sitting around the table, how many differences there are, how many constellations you can make between people. So there are these incredible differences. And those psalms, they are pretty much like the dots on the map of humanity, where we can return to when we fundamentally disagree. And I believe that choral music is also one of those dots on the map of humanity where you can return to when you fundamentally disagree. You can sing together and feel that solidarity. And that's what we tried with this project. We try to connect the here and now with those very old sources of the Old Testament, knowing also that the Old Testament is not only a religious, the Psalms are not only religious, holy writing for Jews and Christians. So the Quran refers several times to the Psalms as a holy writing. So it's really a binding and interconnect document. And through this project, with those 12, we try to underline that. We would create maybe the next slide. Thank you. Yeah, this is just a nice picture of the one of the that we were giving in the Tivoli Vredenburg during the festival of early May. We in total we did 12 concerts. There were 3 other professional choirs: the Norwegian Soloist Choir, the Tallis Scholars, and Trinity Wall Street Choir, and we attracted over 12,000 people in 2 days, 12 concerts. Next slide. Yes, and here you see what we tried to do in the foyer. So we had these little buttons. You could go into them and put on a headset, and there are voice asking you questions, mostly moral questions, moral issues that derive directly from the Psalms. Next slide, please. Yeah, and here's the photo exhibition. You see all of those Psalms and the text of all of those actual pictures and the text that we put underneath them. Next picture, please. Yes, and here we go. Another project, and here I would refer to what I said previously about Leonardo da Vinci and about the way the art functions like a pillar for society and can be fluid in that society. My father was an opera singer, as before, dementia, 7 years ago now, 7.5 years ago. And I saw him slowly on disappear to the mist. Horrible things were happening to him. He had not Alzheimer, but Lewy body dementia, which meant that in first instance he wouldn't know how to buckle up in the anymore, but then he wouldn't know how to put a placemat on the table. He would put them underneath the table, and then he thought that his plate, and he was pasta on the phone, and then he would start to get hallucinations, and he would see rivers running through the streets, or see little men on the roof, and he was paranoid. He thought that my mother of 81 had an affair with somebody else, and he would just stand behind her and in anger and say, "But then just tell me who it was, who it is you're seeing." And that's horrible to go through for him. It's of course also horrible for those for me and my family in this case, but unfortunately there are so many people in this world who deal with this disease directly or indirectly. All of those people who supply healthcare, family caregiver, or even health, they go through difficult moments, and you maybe you wanted a friend with a friend, or you go to a psychologist, or you go and do yoga in order to yourself, and what an artist does is you try to find consolation through making a piece of art out of it. So that's how this project called Forgotten came about. It's a musical journey through the mind of somebody with dementia. And it was definitely not a performance for people with dementia, because it's very confronting. But we did have a side program with Maartje de Lind, who is a singer herself, professional singer, but she has developed a method to reactivate the brain of people with dementia singing. It's wonderful, so wonderful that the Erasmus University of Rotterdam decided, through tour, said, well, we want to research her method. So, but we lacked the money. Then we said, well, maybe we can raise funds through our tour for on the method of March. So that's how you see that how arts, healthcare, and science can collaborate in an amazing way and find each other. And it's an initiative from an arts institution in this case. Next slide, please. I'm almost done. Well, this is Tears of Peter. I just wanted to show you this. When it comes to urgency, this is, I find, a very urgent project. You all know, well, I can't express my empathy, my compassion with all of you for the struggle that you must have gone through when lockdowns happened and we could not sing anymore. And we all know that at a certain point the discussion was, okay, choirs, they are under they are super spreaders, and maybe the 1.5 meters distance is not enough, and maybe we should go to 3 meters. And then at a certain point, a German insurance company said, no, well, we only will pay you if you took 8 meters distance. And then you think, how on earth are we going to be able to do a concert with 8 meters distance? Then we can only sing with a choir of 3 people or 4 people at the most. And then I came to this idea, well, then we can just as well put them in glass tubes. And all of a sudden I saw that image before me, and I thought, yeah, it's almost like they become artifacts in a museum, like artifacts from a past time. And then our chief conductor, Peter Dijkstra, he said he wanted very much to do the Lacrime di San Pietro, the Tears of Peter. He wanted to perform them, and then I thought, oh, that's a beautiful match. The Tears of Peter, 7 singers in 7 glass tubes, and then one dancer, Saint Peter, dancing in freedom through those tubes. And of course, how ironic that is, because Peter is the holder of the key of the kingdom of heaven, and he was the most loyal disciple of Jesus. In this project, we reflected from one side on Corona, and from the other side, we also reflected on the fact that there's no space for idealism in this world anymore. We combined it with very sarcastic madrigals of Ligeti, and it was a sort of a struggle between the demons of Ligeti and the angels of Orlando di Lasso's Tears of Peter, and Peter himself dancing there in the middle. And that's just an example of how you can focus on the here and now in a very quick way, because we mounted this project, I think, in 3 months only. I think next slide, and I'm going to round off because I think I'm well over time already. This is a project we're going to do next year in November. Next year, it's called Van Gogh in Me. It's a collaboration with the Van Gogh Museum and the Belvedere Museum. Here we're actually painting the future on the canvas of the past. If you go to the next slide, we collaborate with an Italian audiovisual collective called Fuse, and they analyzed the paint strokes of Klimt and Van Gogh. They used the paintings of Van Gogh to actually create new paintings. So the picture that you see here is actually moving. But the story that is lying behind it is about the fin de siècle of the 19th century going towards the First World War. And eventually, this whole concert is a call for world peace, something I think we do need desperately. But let's go quickly over to Imre with our talent program, NKK Next.
So Tido, thank you very much for this presentation. It gives me really a lot to think about. And I followed the Netherlands Chamber Choir for the past 10 years, and you could really see that transition happening, and to hear this story also behind it, and that it's not only what's happening on stage, but there is more behind it. And what I really like, I think maybe everybody does it, but we tend to get into the routines of life in just doing what we do without thinking about how we do it. We tend to forget how we do it. So that's maybe also part of our training and education focuses on the how. And as soon as we start on our with the tasks that we do in our jobs, we do the what until it gets kind of routine, and then it gets stuck. And what I really like with what you show and what you explain is that you add another dimension to get back to the why. And what I saw in the productions happening in the past years with the Netherlands Chamber Choir is that there's really, it became from a two-dimensional product like the sheet music, singers behind the sheet music, singing still great, but you really added an extra dimension to what is happening both in the concert hall but also in the position in society. I think after Imre's talk we can share a little bit about what it takes to do it. But first, I think it's interesting to hear what the Netherlands Chamber Choir does with their talent program. And Imre, you are currently in charge of the talent program.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, and you're a conductor yourself as well, as I understood. So please, just take us through your story, who you are and what you do.
Great. Thanks a lot, Daphne. And I think a lot is already being said, in other words, by Tido, of what I wanted to share with you. It's an honor to be here, by the way. I just want to take you a little bit through what we do with our talents, young talents, which is a concrete and direct result of, I think, the past centuries we went through as the Netherlands Chamber Choir, and how we want to work with young people, taking the co-responsibility not only for our own choir, but in a broader sense for young professionals, singers, but not only singers, looking into the future. So maybe we can go to the first slide for that, just so we see a nice logo and some people standing on a balcony. This is the last group of NKK Next, 8 people. We hire every year, we give them a contract for 6 months to do something that is very uncertain in the beginning. We can bring it back maybe to one question we asked them on the first day. And that is, what does the choir world look like in 2050? And it sounds like a very simple question at first, but when you deconstruct this question, then I think there's a lot of questions behind it. Namely, we need to have an idea of what 2050 is to us, because we can, today the COP started in of course in Scotland, so I would wish that generations to come would join this COP, and that we would find a way with the arts to give the space, give the chair as well to the future generations to come. And it's the same with the choral world. It's very abstract in the beginning what a choral music would be like in 2015. You could give any answer and it could be right or wrong. But there's more aspects to it, because it's also a question of what you want. It's a question of seeing perspective that's already starting now. 2050 is, of course, in a little 30 years. So it's also a time frame that is the career of the young people that we work with. So it's also a direct question to them: what do you want to do when you're in the midst of your career? They come from the conservatory. Most of them are graduated just right away and then come to us, and then we pay them to do a research altogether around this question. I will tell a little bit more about that later on. Keep it short, but maybe we can first go to the next slide to tell a little bit about myself as a conductor, because I think it's nice to have a concrete example of what Tido was telling before in the route that I took. I have been studying in The Hague, city near the coast, where we both came from, Daphne, today. And you see here a picture of a concert of one of the choirs I conduct, Kamerkoor Jip. You see me, maybe you can find me somewhere. I had long hair at that time. Well, it's a nice thing to to research. I had just graduated from the conservatory. I had learned lots of things in terms of music theory, how to work with groups, how to conduct, etc. And I had a lot of ambition, starting to conduct my own choirs, setting up my own choirs, and then giving beautiful concerts with inspiring music that I already had, or new music that I found. And this picture shows a change for me. And what happened in 2014-15, of course, this is the time also of in the whole world the refugee crisis, we call it, that was happening. And I was conducting my choirs on the Wednesday evening, and afterwards I would get home and watch the news, and then in my private time I would be worried about it, and I would care about it, and also, after a couple of months, I wanted to know more, and not more of the news, not more of the crisis, but I wanted to know more of the people behind it. So what I did was ringing some people that actually flew to the Netherlands, starting to work with them together. You see them on stage as well. Not to reflect on the refugee crisis, but just to get to know each other and get to know each other's culture. So we performed music from Syria about love, from Afghanistan, from other places on the world, and we had to learn as a choir, use the Arabic words, put them into music. And after this project, I suddenly realized, and thought I was very naive before, but I suddenly realized that actually as a conductor you can do something, not as an activist maybe, but in the arts you can do something to relate to what you are worried about at night. And that gives a lot of strength to do what you want to do. Maybe we can go to the next slide to see how this comes back in how we work with young talents of the Netherlands Chamber Choir. Just to quickly go through the 4 pictures you see here. On the left top you see the first NKK Next project group of 9 people that were working with this choir with this question of the future of choral music, and also how they want to find their urgency in that, their personal urgency, but also their urgency as a group. And they made a performance with visual arts, with dance, with theater, with choral a cappella music around the theme of burnouts under young people, which was for them a personal theme, but also a reflection on what they saw around them. On the right top, you see a couple of people lying on the floor. It has been a project that was reflecting on the relationship, and I think Tido has mentioned it as well in another way, but the relationship between technology and humanity, and how we can find with technology or in technology, still the vulnerability that we feel that there is a quality in choral singing. Or maybe technology is going against this stream of really feeling vulnerable as a quality. Maybe it is something that brings us more close together to create a more intimate space. I will come back to that. On the bottom left, you see one woman standing and a lot of arms around it. It's a group that focused, and 9 women, by the way, that focused on, a couple of things, but one of them, they knew that there were a group of 9 women performing together, so they felt that they had the responsibility to do something with that as well, and they wanted to come out of the cliche of women choir, which we still see a lot of around us as a sort of angelic, beautiful singing sound. They wanted to see how diverse a woman can be, how diverse a woman singing group can be, and what different sounds come out of that. And I'm making it more simple because there were many more different layers to this performance, but this is one of the aspects. On the last picture, you see some people standing, and before I tell something about it, I think it's nice to watch a 1-minute example of what this group were doing in the last year. So let's go to this video now. Yeah, it's just a short bit. Of course, we want to continue listening, but to give you the example of what we do with those people, for them it was a special project because they produced it entirely within the Corona crisis. So half of their traineeship for 3 months they could only meet online, and they wanted to dive into the aspect of what is actually the art of gathering. How do we come together as communities, within our families, within the choirs we're singing, within our village, but also in the way that is sometimes physically together and sometimes physically apart. And how can you still feel that you are part of a gathering when physically apart, like where we are today? And they wanted to make a show in which you at home would feel as intimate and as involved as the people that were there live on stage. Why I wanted to show this one thing in particular is that what I find interesting to see around me is that, of course, the choir is a unity. And I, as a conductor, also in terms of sound, want to see it as a unity. It should all sound together, and that's an endless philosophical question of where the unity of a choir comes together with individual expression. And I think this question is changing throughout time in a world in which individual qualities and individual expression becomes more and more important. So one of the questions that is coming back in all those traineeship, in all those groups of young people, is how can we use our personal qualities and our personal urgency and still be together? And you see here in the camera work that has been done that you are involved with individuals and still have a sense of community around that. the group that we bring together is often not only singers, but also other people that come from a theater background, or composers or conductors, because we see that if they are a diverse group of people with a diverse group of a set of backgrounds, they have a lot more opportunities to create together. Let's go to the next slide, maybe, to show how they, behind the scenes, then work together. Well, if we look at this picture, a couple of things are occurring, of course. There's no conductor at first. One of them has a conducting background, but he's not conducting the piece that they're rehearsing. So there's an equality within the group. They all play their equal role. And I think that's something that you can do with 8 people, but I have the naive feeling that this is also possible with more people, with 20 people or with 30 people, with an equal playing ground in which you try to find a way of working together that you don't have to compromise for anything, compromise for your own personal artistry, compromise for the musical quality, compromise for all other sorts of qualities, but still have this circle as a metaphor for really creating together. And co-creating brings also out a lot of new insights and new perspectives and new mirrors to your own artistry, in which we learn at this talent development program that's so important to not compromise, but be very playful in the way you work together. Let's go to the next slide. And if I come back to how we work with young talents, then you possibly recognize this picture. We give them half a year to experiment and to work together, but not only musically. So we invite them at the office and we explain them how the social media works. We explain them how the budget works, and we give the budget to them so they can work with it. We invite them to do the marketing themselves, to think of all the office tasks that are behind it, but also to think and write and talk about the why. On the first day when they meet, why are they making art and why should they do it together? But on the last day, when on stage and just before the performance, this why question is still on the top of their minds, to see what kind of audience they want to address, what kind of story to. So we see them going back to the homo universalis, I think Tido was referring to in the beginning of his speech, trying to help and guide young people to not be a singer, to not be something from a theater background, but be a human being with a lot of artistic qualities that can use all of these different sets of qualities to bring them to audiences. Let's go to the next one. And that brings me back to close off, and then I hope there's questions that we can talk about. You see here a picture of our chef conductor of the Netherlands Chamber Choir, chief conductor Peter Dijkstra. I'm really questioning, and it's also a question I want to address to the people attending today. What is actually the role of a conductor nowadays and in the future? Is that a leading role? Is that a guiding role? Is that a part of the circle? And I hope that this question we can talk on a little bit more now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It would be really nice. You can use the chat to share also your ideas and ask questions for Imre and Tido. So if you still have questions, feel free to ask them. My first thought, well, actually you used the circle and you kind of both where Tido started, you end. So you close the circle with what you explain. What I find interesting, and maybe I would like to go back to Tido as well. I've been in a traineeship program as myself as well as a civil servant, and there they tell you, you should be innovative, but if it really gets to the point where you want to be innovative, then you are not allowed to be innovative, but you just have to copy what others do. What I actually find very interesting in this program is that you do not ask the next generation to do what the professional choir already does, but ask to come up with something new. So you do not start with a program with sheet music and go and study that, but you really start with an open question. And I wonder, Tido, what can you take from what this generation bring to your choir, and are there already things that you brought back to the ideas you are developing with your choir? Is there something you can say about that?
Oh, it's endless, the exchange of learning. The learning really goes both ways. One very practical element is, for example, the way we audition NKK Next, the talent program, is not the standard audition where somebody comes in with a massive passion area and some other pieces that they can choose by themselves, and then there's a commission behind the table and saying, yes, thank you very much, you will hear from us. But really to focus on the multiple facets that we believe are necessary now in order to create choral performances. So we started that off in Next as a sort of a test, basically, is to not only examine their vocal skills, but also look at their theatrical skills, at their physical skills. How do they move in space? Also their artistry, the way they perceive themselves as artists is an essential question. So basically, that's something that we've started to do with NKK Next. So the audition is not only 15 minutes anymore. No, it's a full day. With workshops and working together and telling personal stories, and then playing with those stories in a theatrical way, in a presented way, and to bring this auditioning technique now to the Netherlands Chamber Choir as well. It's just a very simple example, but there's one.
And how do the candidates respond to that? Because actually you're changing the rules of the game. How do they respond to that? Because they are used to a certain pattern of auditioning, and suddenly you add different elements to that. Well, they are maybe not trained to do that. So can you create a setting where they feel comfortable enough to explore those skills as well? Or how do you take that along?
Well, I mean, Imre can maybe reflect on how this young generation feels about how it is to go about these new techniques. What I notice is that more and more singers that we are attracting are not only amazing singers, but are also fundamentally interested into presenting choral music in different ways.
That's really interesting. So you actually already see it that the singers want it themselves, and you actually kind of also provide the platform for them to express their part, which they're usually not really used to. Do you recognize that with the next generation you are recruiting for the program as well?
Definitely, and I think there's a world to win in terms of in all stages of a career, asking the question like, what would you think, and what would you want? Because at the conservatory, these questions are often not really asked from people. So also the next generation, so to say, they come in and they want to work on these questions, and they want to know why. But they're not used to it. So it's also new for the young generation. It does feel that they can bring in qualities, but also things that they need to work on, all out of transparent. They can bring it on the table, and that is a relief, because sometimes they've also been learning to like present themselves in a certain way, and there's no escape if you ask about all different kinds of qualities.
That's really actually quite interesting, because actually what you are saying there is there's a huge potential in our sector that we have been overlooking for decades by not inviting them to bring that along to what we do as choral musicians, be it conductors or etc.
That's right.
Yeah, maybe we had one question that was asked online. This is also talking about something new. Maybe I can ask the question to you because you already read it. It maybe relates also to the last project that NKK Next is. The question is if you have an opinion about virtual choirs, which of course it has been a core activity for many choirs in the last year to stay connected, and there have been many new kind of products being developed as well. Can you tell me something about it, or maybe what you saw in that the group expressed about this?
Yeah, sure. Me as conductor, I was too afraid to go online, so I didn't do it myself. But well, actually, I have to think of something that was said to me a couple of months ago. Someone said, like, with the experience we gained in the past year, the rich experience of working online and all the abilities with and the possibilities with Gemelless, but in all other ways to present yourself online, gives us as choirs an opportunity to reach people that are not able to come to concerts.
Yeah.
And I think, like, for elderly people, for people that are far away, this is such a great opportunity.
Yeah.
And I, reflecting on the short example I gave, that's not my work, but the group of NKK Next. I think if you do it in a good way, there's things that you cannot do on stage that you can do online. For instance, like having a personal face expression where you can focus on. Often choirs on stage are very far away. And therefore are more a unity than an individuality. And digitally, you can come closer to people. You can come in their living room and be personally attached to them. So I think there's a whole field that we can still discover here.
That's really interesting. And it's also interesting to combine with live performance, but also to bring it to different places. So I hope this answers the question. The question a little. Maybe we almost time is ticking. We're almost heading towards the end of this session. Maybe first, before I invite Dion to join our conversation. Maybe Tido, can I ask you? You have been working with the Netherlands Chamber Choir on kind of transforming the way you work and the way you want to position your choir, and really go from doing what you've always been doing to really rooting again and answering why the Netherlands Chamber Choir exists, and not only thinking about it, but actually doing it. I think it demands quite a lot of courage, because you have to take a lot of people along, both within your organization, but also outside of your organization, also your audience. So I think it's actually quite courageous to do so, but we also need to do it. So in that sense, I really resonate what you told in the introduction on the sense of urgency and the responsibility we have to take. But I can imagine it takes courage. But maybe you can explain, or maybe give the people online some tips or hints. What do you need, or what is the first step, or where should you think about if you want to really change fundamentally the way you work? Is there something you can give to our audience on that part? It's a broad question.
Well, one of the things which is also an answer to your question about how NKK Next relates to NKK, is to give ownership to your singers. We are very much used to work top down. And the conductor and the artistic commission deciding upon the program, and then it's handed out to the singers. But if you see how much talent there is, and how much sources and stories and beauty and suffering, and in other words, there is within this group, the talents that are present are amazing. but you do need to start a dialogue in order to find that out, a true dialogue. I've been working for 6, 7 years with pretty much the same singers, and it took me Corona and the mirror of which Imre held in front of me in our conversation to understand that we needed to work differently with our singers, and that really helped me to see them in a different way and to give them co-ownership of what we were doing. And the choir is I just want to give that one away, and it relates to what I'm saying now is the choir to me is the symphony orchestra of the 21st century. It has this amazing potential to to work in projects which are cross-disciplinary. How we can move in space, we can use text, we can act. In other words, in this whole movement of creating encounters between art disciplines, the choir is just an amazing tool. The second thing is it's very cheap to sing together. You don't need an instrument fund in order to start singing together. Put 10 children around the table and they can start right away. Nothing needed, only the people, and you can start. And the third thing, of course, is in this highly polemic world, solidarity is a key thing, and I think choral music can play a very important role into that. Don't underestimate the role that you are playing in creating solidarity into this world. And the more you're aware of it, the more you can do about it. Yeah. The more it will resonate.
Yeah, thank you, Tido. Thank you. We got 2 more questions actually here. I think one is, do the young singers participate also in the choosing of the repertoire? And I think they actually build the program themselves. Is that correct?
Yeah, they get coaching in all the different aspects, but they do everything themselves, from budgets to making the program themselves, from beginning to end. So they often give commissions to composers because they want to have a very specific sound.
Yeah.
So they also cooperate a lot with young composers.
Yeah. And I see here Allegri Derry asks, do you think there is a danger that the virtual choir and live stream performance might have an impact on audience at live performances? Did you think about, did the group maybe also think about that, what effect it has on the audiences in different ways? I mean, will they stay at home, or how they what they expect when they get back to the concert hall, for example?
I see. I think it is a very different experience being in your living room and having this intimacy that I was talking about, or going to a live performance and having the sound all around you and being part of that. And I think it's not the one thing cannot replace the other thing. So I think they can coexist in a way. And I don't see live stream or digital performances as a competition so far. Also, that's not what's happening, at least not in the Netherlands.
And could it be that people would expect something different in concert hall because they saw that intimacy and the image on screen where choral music had extra dimensions? So should we bring more to the concert halls as well because they're expecting more? Or
possibly, yeah. Why not?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, why not? I think that's the right answer.
Why not walk off stage and do it in another way? Yeah.
So maybe also one question to round up this part of the meeting. I think you are a conductor yourself. You graduated a couple of years ago, and you already told a little bit about the switch you made in your own thinking. If you are kind of looking back now to both your studies and what you see the chamber choir doing and what you do with the next generation, how do you think about how we train our conductors? I think you already raised a couple of things, but what is something that we should think about in training our conductors, and also thinking about, and that's maybe our next step, what we will do at our festivals. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so there's so many aspects of being a conductor, and I don't ever would want to argue that like how you move your hands would become less important. So, and that just takes time. But this whole other part, like how to give space to your own urgency as a conductor, but also how to guide a group of people, how to form a community, are things on top of that I think needs a lot more attention and could use a lot more attention. So my wish would be that the conductors that studying to become a conductor takes 7 years, and that we do a lot more for conductors to also just exchange between conductors how they approach it, because it's also there's no one single answer to any of those questions. It's also important to just have concrete examples and to have a conversation going on between the conductors. So I hope at festivals like
I think this is the perfect bridge to start talking about our international choral festival. Please, Dion, if you can join us at the table. I think what you say is actually correct. Maybe the study shouldn't last 7 years, but we should all kind of embrace lifelong learning and meeting each other and having possibilities to exchange. And I think choral festivals and international choral festivals play such a huge, important role in it, because you bring people together for a short amount of time, and people who are all involved in choral music, who are active in choral music. And I think especially when an international choral festival, you bring different cultures, different backgrounds in one place. You can show each other what you have been working on in the past days. So we saw the movie at the very beginning, and it already excites me. I can't wait to see the first choirs returning here. Dion, welcome in your own in your own city, in your own setting. It was really, really nice to have this talk with Tido and Imre. I think we could talk for hours on this theme, and I think we should do that in the next festival. So when is the next festival?
The next festival will be May 26 to 29, 2022. So in about half a year. And
do we have exciting things on the program?
Well, I think we have exciting things, but first, thank you very much, Tido and Imre, for this really inspiring presentation. And you explained it. This is what a festival should be, and all the aspects of a festival you just mentioned is what we like to have in our festival as CantaRode. What we do, we have a 4-day festival. That means that we have an opening concert at Ascension Day. The festival takes place always at Ascension Day weekend. So we have an opening concert. One of the main part of the opening concert is the presentation of the participating choirs. Then we have at Friday and Saturday 2 rounds of competition. We have a series of concerts at Friday night in the whole southern part of the province of Limburg. And we have, after the competition, the big party at Saturday night with the open singing and choirs getting together and singing together, which is a fantastic event. We have several workshops. Workshops for next year are Conductors Meet the Jury. We have a clinic for youth choirs given by Maria Guinot from Venezuela. And we have a workshop with choral highlights from the music of Carol Jenkins, conducted by Brady Allred. And this will be the 2 workshops will be a part of the opening concert. And the workshop Carol Jenkins will be accompanied by an orchestra here from the city. And this is a connection, it's a brass orchestra, connection with the World Music Contest of Bands we have also in this city. Then we have the closing ceremony at Sunday with the final concert. And since the 2019 edition, we have extra concerts. That was the last time Kalmus Ensemble from Leipzig. We have next year Singapore from Germany. And I'm so happy to announce that we have for 2023 Voces 8 from Great Britain. So that's an excellent series of extra concerts.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I already get excited. I saw the movie at the very beginning, and I said, "Yeah, this is it's so great when singers meet." But I think what we have been discussing now, and that is also a big part of the festivals. What we maybe also missed a little bit last year, that getting together and talk about these kind of things that Tido and Imre were just discussing. So it's not only ideas, but you can really exchange and think about how we can build a choral sector for the next generation.
Yes, absolutely. Well, next generation it's correct, because the participating choir exists mainly about students, younger singers.
Yeah.
And well, bringing them all together and experience, like you just explained, that's fantastic. And it's not the competition, it's not the concert, it's the whole package of being together and experience that what we all love, the choral music.
Yeah.
And the exchange of ideas. The workshop at Sunday morning about conductors made a jury is not only about the performances they did, but all in one-on-one meeting with all the individual jury members. So, and that means that you can exchange about interpretation, about how does an American jury member look at your interpretation regarding to a jury member from South America, from Eastern Europe, and so all this bringing together is so exciting.
Yeah, definitely something to look forward to.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and for those who never visited Limburg, it's really beautiful. We just arrived there today by train, and as soon as you enter Limburg, you see the hills popping up, and you go through the hills and see the. It's a beautiful surrounding. People are really nice. They have very nice fly. The food is really good as well. But most of all, I think it's really Kerkrade is really a perfect place for having this festival, for spending those 4 days together in this environment. Are there lots of people from Kerkrade joining? Also, young people joining?
Yes, because part of CantaRode was Canta Young. It's now a separate foundation, but we brought the choral singing back to the elementary schools. So all the elementary schools in the city have a singing program. And now we have 4 youth choirs, 1 boys choir, by the way.
Wow, yeah.
Yes, and 3...
Just founded, is it?
Yeah.
The boys choir just founded, yeah.
2 years ago, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So, and we have every year between 200 and 250 and 350 young kids singing again in choirs.
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. Because
so, and like you mentioned, Kerkrade, yes, it has fantastic venues. We have the Abbey of Rolduc, we have our concert hall in the city, which is completely renovated. So it's a fantastic place to be, and the people know what it is. The city knows what it is to have a festival. We have since the early 50s. The World Music Contest for bands, like I said, but we have a chamber choir festival, chamber music festival too, Orlando Festival. So, and now the Choral Festival, and people know what it is to host bands, to host choirs. So, I think yes, correct. It's a very good place to be to experience the music.
That's fantastic. I think. It's actually time. We had 1.5 hours for this webinar. So I would like to thank all the audiences, people who watched, and also the people who sent in questions for attending this webinar. And especially thanks to Imre here at the table, and Tido from his hotel room in Germany. Thank you very much for joining. And good luck tonight with your concert. I see you.
Thank you. After this conversation, what I would really love to do is dive into that musical tunnel which I see behind you. I'm just so curious to throw myself in there. Thank you so much, also Dion CantaRode, for the invitation.
Well, my pleasure, and. I hope it will be the start of further cooperation between Netherlands Chamber Choir and CantaRode.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for joining this webinar. And of course, I hope to see you all in May 2022 here in Kerkrade. Thank you very much and goodbye.